Hi, this is Justin. Today I'd like to discuss with you my history as a student learning mathematics and science. In elementary school, I always remembered loving mathematics. I was actually quite good at it. I remembered using my math skills for adding and subtracting, and in grade 7 when we learned algebra, I really remembered thriving at that. I remember my fellow students not doing so well at it, and personally, I had a hard time understanding why they were struggling at it when I excelled so greatly. I always remembered taking my homework home and actually looking forward to doing my math. I remember talking to my friends on the playground about a big math test coming up or about math class in general, and always getting quite excited about doing it. I always remember my friends thinking that I was very strange. How could I look forward to math when we had this big test? Of course, when we do the test, and I would always get a very good mark on it. As far back as I can remember, I always viewed mathematics as a puzzle, a game of sorts that I would really enjoy doing. How can I manipulate this to get the correct answer? How can I move this number to where it needs to be? Which formula can I use to solve with the given information, etc. And I always found that very interesting that I was able to use that information and decide that information for myself. And I remember trying to challenge myself and trying to come up with new ways to solve these puzzles. On the other hand, for me, science was a very different experience. I hated science class. I recall going to science class and learning the parts of a cell. I recall filling out diagrams, filling out worksheets, listening to the teacher list off the parts. I recall making a model of a cell and just remember not enjoying it at all. Another aspect of science that I really did not enjoy was forming hypotheses for experiments. It always baffled me how I could try to consider what might happen before I was to do something. I had no context of what might happen. As I began studying in high school, I quickly found that my interest and enjoyment in mathematics deteriorated. I wasn't able to get high marks in mathematics anymore, and I found myself struggling to comprehend even the simplest things that it felt like that my teacher was trying to explain to us. Science class was not very different. I recall sitting in the desk in the lab and listening to my teacher explain um, the nitrogen cycle and explain the chemical compounds that make up various things, and not being able to feel like I understood at all what I was learning. During this period, I quickly discovered my passion for performing arts, specifically music. I recall always using creative outlets during much of my education, but I struggled to find a way how I could be creative in math and sciences. Thinking back on the article, Teaching as a Cultural Activity, and reflecting on these experiences that I just talked about, I believe now that what was happening was that both my teacher and myself were just following the cultural scripts that were in place in our classroom. It was the teacher's job to stand at the front of the room dictating the order of the steps which we must take in order to solve the mathematical or science principles, and it was my job as a student to answer them step by step, just the way that we were taught. Reflecting back now, it's easy to see why I felt that my creativity was stifled in these classrooms. And needless to say, I stopped taking those classes as soon as I was able to. As a future educator, my goal when teaching mathematics and science is to reintroduce creativity into these classrooms. I want to inspire children to view these math and science puzzles as a puzzle, just like I did when I was a child. Through the use of math manipulatives, children are able to visualize the problem and be able to deduce for themselves the best way for them to solve the problem. Through the use of literature, children can read and discover the interesting math and science concepts that they might not have otherwise had learned about. I think a really important takeaway here is that we can engage the students in their own math and science learning by making the knowledge relevant to them. I think one way we can do this is through technology. There's a lot of science and mathematics concepts in video games. Of course, we can discuss the idea of playing math and science-based games where the learning is done through numeracy and through adding and subtracting, etc., but also through exploring how games are made and the logic behind them. For example, of course children are familiar with Mario, but are they familiar with how far he can jump, how fast he can jump, what happens if he was to jump on a Goomba and then continue his downward trajectory? This is a really interesting way to teach physics, and I think it can be done in early PJ grades as well as in IS. In closing, I would like to restate how excited I am now after taking this course to teach mathematics and science and to introduce arts and creativity into it. While I do think STEM is very valuable, I believe STEAM is a really truly powerful teaching tool. Thank you.